Alright guys, so we're going to install the Wilwood TX6R big brake kit front and back on my 2016 3500. Here's some of the parts. We've got 4 boxes for calipers. I already put the 2-piece rotors together. We've got 2 sets of brake lines, one for the front, one for the back. A whole bunch of high temp Wilwood brake fluid and some mounting brackets for the calipers. And I went ahead and picked up this OEM Tools one-person bleeder kit, which I've never bled brakes before, so I'm going to find out if I can do it. And then I've got a turkey baster to remove the old fluid from the master cylinder. And then here's the front and rear instruction kits. So I've got the truck backed into the garage here a little bit. I'm going to start with the right rear, and I'm going to get it jacked up. The wheels are chalked, all 3 of them, and since I can't use the parking brake. And I'm going to get this off. Alright, so I suppose first step here is to take this caliper off, since we're removing the whole thing. Just 2 bolts, this big one here, another one down here, and then this line's going to disconnect, but I need to get it off the caliper first. There we go. And then the other one I'm going to do with the breaker bar, and then you're going to take this hard line off, or you can disconnect it here. This is an 11 mil. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove this little clip here that holds the brake line up. And this is a 13 millimeter hard line connection. I don't care if this fluid drips out because I'm going to replace all the fluid anyway. There we go. Take this caliper off. Here's what your parking brake shoes look like. Looks like they're in pretty good shape. Okay, so the next step after you get the caliper and the rotor off here is to install the mounting bracket. You want to make sure that it sits flush against the surface, that there's no irregularities, that nothing's touching. If there is something touching, you can just grind it off with like a little Dremel bit deal. And then I guess we're going to go ahead and tighten this to factory specification, and then we're going to start putting shims on here, put the rotor on, and then put the caliper on and make sure it's centered. Alright, so the bracket fits on here nice and square, as you can see. So I need to remove these 2 bolts, put Loctite on them, and then torque them down to 221 foot-pounds. I don't have red Loctite, so I'm just going to use blue. I think between that, the original Loctite that's on there, and the torque, they're going to be fine. It's a good thing I weigh 243. on to the next. So what you want to do is, you've got 4 calipers, and these are 2-piece calipers or rotors. They've got all these bolts. You have to torque them down to 25 foot-pounds. So the smaller ones are your fronts, the bigger ones are your rears, and that's because they've got the drum for the parking brake, and then they're directional. So like on this one, which I've already picked out, there's an arrow on here. Let's see. They're heavy. There's your arrow pointing in the direction of rotation. This coating here is going to wear off, and you're only going to have black in those little slots. So check that out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get the caliper in here, and we're going to center it not only side to side, but top to bottom. Alright, so you've got 4 rotors, and you need to figure out which ones you're using. So there's left and right, and there's front and back. So this is the rear brake kit manual, and here in number 5 it shows 120-13817-18 BK, that's black. Same part number below is red. Same part number below is clear anodized. So we got black, so we're going to use a 17 or a 18. Now if you look at the boxes, here's the 17 BK, 18 BK. Left hand, right hand. So this is the one because the 17 is the rear and it's the right hand. The 18 is a rear and it's a left hand. So we're going to use this one on this particular wheel. And then these are the front part numbers, the 13 BK and the 14 BK, left hand, right hand. And then when you find the correct, you have to figure out which side is up. It says the larger pistons go where the rotor will be exiting, which is pretty simple because the rotor spins forward, spins up, so the larger piston should be up here. Now if you look, it says Wilwood, so obviously this side goes out. And if you look inside, there's 3 pistons on each side. Clearly this piston is largest, and it's going to mount up because this is the way that the rotor exits. So this is how it's going to go, just like this. So each mounting bracket comes with the 4 gold shims, the 2 washers, and the 2 lock nuts. You're going to start out with 1 of those shims each on each stud, and then put the bracket on, tighten everything down, and then put the pads in, and then that'll show you if you're centered or not. One on here, and then one on the bottom one. And I haven't weighed these parts, but I can tell you that these calipers are much lighter than the ones they're replacing. Just like that. Boom. There we go. Then we're going to pull these pins out and put the pads in after we tighten it up. Alright, so right now we've got the caliper on here with the rotor on here, and we've gotten it temporarily tightened down. There's 1 shim on each one of these studs, and we're going to try and get these pins out so we can put the pads in and see if we need to add or reduce shims. After we've done that, we'll go ahead and torque it down to 65 foot-pounds, and then we're going to go ahead and put the wheel on, or put the brake line kit on, and then move to the next wheel. And then after that we'll be going to the front and doing some bleeding. Alright, so inside where these retaining clips are, there's these little circlip things, and it'd be nice if I had some needle nose, but for whatever reason I can't find my needle nose, so I'm just going to use this little pick. See if I can get it out. There we go. There's one. There's 2. Hopefully I can get those back in. And these should just slide right out, like so. There's 2. Go ahead and put the pads in. Alright, here's the brake pad kit. There's two identical kits, one for the front, one for the back, so it doesn't matter what order you put these in. Go in like this. This is where it's nice to have a little pick. Oops, a little too far. There we go. There we go. Alright. Now that you've got the pins in, what you want to check for is that these pads are just flush with the top of the rotor, because you want full pad contact without touching the hat. As you can see, there's definitely plenty of clearance on the hat there, but you want to make sure this is nice and flush. And it looks like we are pretty much perfect, because there's a beveled edge here on the rotor and you don't want to contact that. So this is perfect with one shim. So we're going to go ahead and torque these to 65 foot-pounds, put the retainer clips back in, throw the brake line on, move on to the next wheel. So I'm using a 15mm 12-point socket. I'm going to go ahead and torque this to 65 foot-pounds. Okay, so we're all torqued down, and now all we need to do is put the retaining clips back in. Hopefully that's not a big deal here. We use an 1/8" extension. Pop those suckers right back in there. Eighth-inch extension. You can hear them pop in. It's important because you do not want these pad retaining clips coming out while you're driving down the highway. And then you want to rock these back and forth, and they are secure. Okay, next step, onto the brake line. Alright, the next step here is to install the rear brake line kit from Wilwood. Part number here is 220-11196. Says it's for a half-ton, 2007 to 2011, but it works for all kinds of different vehicles. I called Wilwood to confirm, and they said these are the correct brake lines. Alright, so here's the inlet fitting. So there's a couple of these in the box. You're going to put this one in, and then there's another thing obviously that goes here. Looks like this. So they clip in like that, and you're going to screw it on with that, and then the line has identical ends, so it doesn't matter. And then you get new retainer clips. That's it, 7/16. I think you just go ahead and snug this down. I don't know what the torque spec is. They don't give you one. They don't even give you instructions with the brake line kit. You're just supposed to be able to figure it out. That seems pretty tight. Don't use pipe thread sealer on this because the could get into the brake line. You don't want that. Okay. It's nice and tight. Alright, so we got the brake line on here. This here is a 13 millimeter. This is a new clip they give you. This is a new fitting. That's an 18 millimeter, 11 millimeter, 11 millimeter, and 11 millimeter. Get everything tightened up, and then there's two bleed screws. There's one on the bottom, one on the top. It says start with the most outboard bleeder screw, but I'm not sure what that means. So anyway, I will be moving on to the next, probably the back left now. Alright, we put the wheel back on to make sure there's no interference, and as you can see, there is no interference with the caliper against the wheel. But if you're looking over here, you see the wheel weights are real close to the inside. I'll bet they're going to hit. They may not, but they might. Might have to take those off and move them closer to the outside of the wheel. But at least we know that it fits. Looks pretty good too. Alright, so basically after doing that right rear, we can see that we're pretty low on fluid in here. And I don't want to run it dry because I'm going to have to bleed the master cylinder. So I'm just going to add some fluid to this. Okay, so of course the wheel weights are exactly on the inside of the wheel, right where the rotor is and or the caliper is, and it made contact. So I'm gonna try and unstick those and move them to the inside, and then I'm gonna have to have the wheels rebalanced because there's just a tiny bit of clearance here with the wheel, not enough for the weights to go through. Okay, here's the passenger side rear. And we are going to go ahead and do the same exact thing that we did on the driver's side, so I may not even film this, but 13/16, take the clip off, take the thing off there. I may just hang the caliper until I get everything else done so I don't lose all my brake fluid again. And from the way that, if you can see the air side there, the bleeder screws are accessible without taking the wheel off. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the wheels back on as soon as I get this done with all four and bleed them with the wheels on. Alright, so as you can see, I'm getting smarter as I go along here. What I did this time, while I'm assembling the bracket and the caliper and everything else, I left the old caliper on the old brake line, and I just stacked it up on the old boxes here so that I'm not losing fluid all over the floor while I'm getting everything else ready. Wish I did that in the first place, but you know, you live and you learn. Alright, the passenger side here is done, except for the brake line. But you can see how beautiful this is, man. It's just such a nice kit. Really, really nice. The only thing that has me worried is getting everything bled because there's 2 bleed screws per, and I got a self-bleeding kit that I've never used before. So that's the only hang-up I think I have. I haven't done the front yet, so I don't know what that'll be like, but go ahead and get this brake line on and move on to the front. Pardon the dog. This is the passenger side front, as you can see, and the way they've got this brake line routed is through this metal bracket. It's pinched on there. So what I think I'm going to do is take this whole thing off, and there's a plastic thing right here, and I think I'm going to run the braided line through that and maybe just zip tie it, because it'll be connected at 2 points plus the middle. I think it'll be fine. This is probably a little bit more complicated than the back, but same procedure. 2 mounting bolts, brake line, take off the caliper, take off the rotor, throw on the new rotor, new caliper, mounting bracket. Pretty simple. Alright, so what you're going to have to do here is this brake line is pinching this metal bracket, and this is what I want to run the stainless brake line through. I'm going to have to cut this with the Dremel to release the pressure on the line. not to go all the way through. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unbolt this thing and just cut the brake line part off. Alright, so what I did here is I took my little Dremel with the cutoff wheel and I cut the whole stupid brake line deal off. I'm going to keep this and run the stainless braided line through this little plastic thing and use some zip ties, and I should be good. Now I can take the whole caliper off. Alright, so the next step here, once you get the rotor off, which by the way has these little torque screws holding it on, once you get that off, you put this bracket on for the caliper, and there's a cutout, and you want to make sure the cutout is on the inside and it sits flush, and then you're going to put Loctite on these two different bolts here and torque them down to 221 foot-pounds, and then you'll move on to mounting the rotor with the shims. Alright guys, as you can see I still have the old caliper and old line on there, but got the new caliper, new rotor on, got the new pads in, and everything is squared up. All three of I've done 3 out of 4 brakes so far. All of them, they say, start with 1 shim on each of the mounting studs, and each time it's been perfect. So they give you extra shims, but you're probably not going to need them. Next step here, we're going to have to disconnect the brake line and go ahead and remove the caliper and get the new brake line on after I insert the brake fluid line deal into this side of the caliper first. You want to get as much done and then hook the line to that. You want to get as much done before you start hooking up the line or disconnecting this line, because you don't want to leak out all your brake fluid. So we'll get on to that now. Okay, this is the front brake line kit, and the part number here is 220-10979. This one shows that it's for a 2007 to 11. However, I called Wilwood and they said it is the right part for this truck, which is a 2016 3500. As you can see, you've got new lines, new clips, and 2 fittings. So it looks like this is the top of the line, and it's going to screw right onto this thing, and then this bottom one is going to have to be threaded in first before we do that. Alright, so after about an hour of screwing around with this, I finally got the flex line in. You can see I've got it routed. It goes up through this little plastic thing here where I cut off the regular brake line deal. Put that back on, retied the ABS sensor, and I've got it up here behind the spindle. And I had to actually use a Dremel to round this thing out because the brake line was too big to fit through this bracket, so I had to do that about 10 times before it finally went through. It's all back together now, so I'm going to go ahead and throw the wheel on and then start on the other side, and then I can bleed it in the morning. Alright guys, there it is. That is the last corner to get done. The front left here, I've been at it for about 6 hours. Got all the calipers, all the rotors, all the lines, everything on. I've still got to bleed the system. My pedal goes to the floor right now, so I'm just using my parking brake to help me get out of the garage. Gonna go ahead and do all the rest of the bleeding and everything in the morning, and hopefully I can figure that out, because there's 2 bleeder screws per caliper, one on the top and one on the bottom, so it's a little more complicated than a normal, probably a stock caliper, but I'm sure it's not that hard. So anyway, I will update this as soon as I start bleeding tomorrow. Hopefully you can see that. They pretty well match the wheels, and all the black that you see on the rotor is going to come off as they wear down and break in. Here's the stainless line. Went together pretty easy. After I got the first one done on the front and on the rear, I knew how to do the second one pretty quickly. You can see I've already got some of the black coming off on this rear rotor, and I had to take all the wheel weights off because they were mounted so close to the inside of the wheel they were going to strike the calipers. You can see there's not a lot of room, so I'm going to have these rebalanced and put the weights like right here on the inside edge, or kind of right in the middle where they're not going to touch. There's the stainless brake line. It's a pretty nice setup, and you've got 2 bleeder screws. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing bled. Alright, so I've got the reservoir topped off with this high temp Wilwood fluid. The cap is loose. And then down here where I'm bleeding, I've got a OEM Tools part number 25136 little vacuum pump here. It's got 1/4 inch line. You're going to need, I think this is a 3/16 line that fits the nipples on this Wilwood. Then you're going to need a little 1/4 inch wrench. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 1/4 inch wrench on first. Slide my deal on here. I'm going to go ahead and start drawing a vacuum. I've been told anywhere from 15 to 25. Jeez, I need to take a break. So I got most of the air and old fluid out of the back right caliper. I'm on the back left caliper now. Just trying to get the air out. The pedal is already firmed up a lot, and I've already gone through 7 or 8 bottles of the Wilwood brake fluid. So hoping I can get all the air out without having to go to the store and get more brake fluid. Especially because it won't match the Wilwood. When I started taking the fluid out, it was orange, dark orange, brown. That was the old original fluid, and as I get the new fluid through the system, it's turning clearer and clearer, as you can see. It's almost totally clear now. And I'm getting more fluid and less air, although I'm still getting a ton of air. Just to fill you guys in, I've been bleeding this truck for probably 3 hours, and I've got mostly all brand new fluid. Actually, I do. I have brand new fluid all the way throughout the truck. All the brakes are new as far as fluid goes, but it just seems like the air is never ending. My brake pedal isn't firm yet. It's still spongy, and I'm just running out of time. So I called Jiffy Lube, and they're going to take care of me right now. So I'm going to drive down there and get them to finish bleeding it, and we'll see how it beds in after that. Alright guys, so we just got back from Jiffy Lube. I had them finish bleeding the brakes. There really wasn't that much air left. They only had to put about a half bottle of fluid in there, but the brake pedal is really nice and firm now. They were making a lot of noise at first when I was first getting them bedded in. I went around the block a couple times and did some, 20 to 0, 30 to 0, 50 to 0 stops, and I was getting all that black coating worn off of the rotors. And then I eventually did some hard freeway stops with it, and then just on my way home, I mean, you could just tell how much better they stopped than the stock brakes. And here's what they look like now that the coating has been worn off. The only black that's left is there in the rotor slots, and that's it. So they're just really, they stop really well. The only problem I heard is that D-Max store told me that they have these on several other shop trucks, and they cause a lot of dust on the wheels. So I mean, that is what it is, but with high performance pads, they're going to wear out quicker and they're going to dust more. But I want the stopping power, especially towing heavy racing. I need it with the bigger wheels and tires as well as the added performance. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the kit. I think it's pretty high quality, and I'll let you know the truck's got 49,000 300 miles right now. So the original brakes would have gotten 200,000. I'll bet you these get probably 50,000 to 50 to 100, somewhere in that range. Depends on how these pads wear. But with the two-piece rotors, you can just put the hat on a new rotor, and the pads are really easy. You just pull two pins out, as you can see there, drop new pads in. So it's not a big deal. Overall, really impressed. Thanks for watching, guys.